Picking up rubbish at the end of the day, keeping areas clean. Wood is something that you have to be conscious of. It's okay to use wood in the field, but wood in the pack shed is something you can't use. And the reason is it's hard to clean wood, it's hard to sanitize wood. In this particular case, there's a plastic bin to put the ice in, but the little area where the ice slides on when they're filling it up is made out of wood. And so, you know, it's probably good and strong, but in this particular occasion, you put a piece of plexiglass or something on top of it so that it's easier to keep clean. So water sources must be tested. We'll talk about that, but basically, water sources must be tested. Irrigation, spray and wash water, surface water, any water that's not potable is not acceptable to use following harvest, okay? So this is how it works in Massachusetts. You have 3 different possible sources of water. You have municipal sources. Now all you need for municipal sources, yes, Mario?
I'll take a step back.
Yep.
What's your feeling on secondhand good cardboard boxes?
You're not supposed to use them. I sympathize because I think this year I paid $3.10 for a 1 3/4 lettuce carton. But reusing the wax cartons is not something that the auditor likes to see in an audit. You know, so doesn't mean you can't use them at all. It's just that you have to deal with the sanitation issue, and you're going to lose points in that area, and that's a problem. So yes.
What about with like apples? You pick into wooden crates and put right into storage.
Right.
Is that a problem?
It's something that it's okay. I realize that you put them into storage. Sometimes you might even grade them before they go into storage. But in the case of apple bin boxes, because that's just kind of the standard that's out there, that's something that they'll accept.
And we have wood on, farm stand.
Right.
And wood used in the display.
Right. It's something that over time you need to work away from or to be able to cover it. And the reason is just that from a food safety standpoint, it's not possible to sanitize wood. And so having it as a place for product after it's washed and ready to go is something that people don't like to see. Now, on the upside, when you are being inspected or having your audit, your retail facility is not part of this.
I just
Okay.
clarifies when the food safety bill,
Yeah.
how much do you think of that would be affected by it?
I don't know. To me, it's not going to be any more effective than it would be affected currently within GAAP. I think for the most part, apple bin boxes are considered acceptable. Wooden apple bin boxes are considered acceptable. For the most part, you're not going to have, your GAAP audit is not going to move into your retail facility because GAAP is supposed to include before that. So these are things that you can do. But for example, you might see a picture later with wood on some of the packing lines, and then some options of covering that wood because they don't like to see wood there. So municipal water, we're talking about if it's from your own town, usually there's an annual report that the town gives that has the water test results for the town. So if you're only using municipal water or municipal water is one of your sources, that's sufficient. If you have a well, each well that you use for whatever reason, you test twice a year. The first time is at the beginning of the season, say April or May, and then at peak use, which around here might be, late July into August, the time of year most likely to be dry, the time of year most likely to be hot, the time of year you're most likely to be doing a lot of irrigation. If it's surface water, it's 3 tests a year. So you have an irrigation pond out there, 3 tests, one in April, one late July, another one maybe around Labor Day. What you are testing for is total E. coli. Okay, that's all you're testing for. You're not testing for heavy metals, you're not testing for anything else. It's total E. coli. Okay, so let me just move here to what our levels are in Massachusetts, just to make sure we have it. So in Massachusetts, we have 3 levels in there. This is in your binder as well as in Massachusetts water standards. Okay, Class A is potable water. Now I would say that we're lucky in this state that our potable water standard is not 0. It's 20 total E. coli colony forming units per 100 mils of water. In Vermont, it's 0. Okay, 0. We have 20. The second one that we use for GAP is this Class B. So the irrigation water cannot exceed 126 colony-forming units of total E. coli per 100 mils of water. 126 just happens to be our recreational water standard in this state. Like when they go and they test a place for swimming. So right now we're seeing if we can all live with the recreational water standards in our states. For the most part, we've done okay here, and 126 is not a bad number. In Vermont, it's 80, it's in the 80s. So the people in Vermont are having some real issues, especially with the amount of dairy they have up there and all that in terms of meeting some of these standards. But for us, I think these are standards that are realistic. I pull water samples. I've got municipal water in my place. I've got a well that used to be the drinking water supply for my house that we use in the pack shed. I also have surface water, a spring-fed irrigation pond. It's got pretty good water movement on it, but of course when we're irrigating a lot, the water's down a little bit. So I pulled tests, and I first started looking at this, and my well next to my house came back at 5. So I was happy with that. 20 was my limit. If I was in Vermont, my well wouldn't have passed, and I would have had to put some sort of unit on it, like dosatron or something, to sanitize that water as it goes into the pack shed with chlorine or something else. My irrigation pond came back at about 88, and I was allowed to have 126. And my irrigation pond is full of everything. There's trout, there's catfish, there's this whole colony of snapping turtles, there's woodchucks, there's muskrats. I don't have a huge Canada geese population there. They basically stay in the river, have a couple of blue heron, occasionally a few ducks, you know, so it's not a pristine, totally clean irrigation pond. When we pulled the water samples, we were fine. One thing to keep in mind, if you're pulling a surface water sample, don't ever pull a surface water sample right after it rains, because that's going to be the highest level of everything. Okay, because of runoff and all kinds of things going on, soil that might get in there and so forth. But it's okay, it's not like you're really skewing the data because you're not going to be irrigating right after it rains. So there's no point in pulling a water sample right after it rains. Water samples on surface water supply should generally be pulled during dry times when you are more actively using it, and your levels will tend to be less during those times. Okay, if you have a wellhead, just make sure that you're not collecting water around the wellhead that's running down the well casing. Try to keep that wellhead nice and high and dry so water doesn't settle in there. Dump tanks, hydro coolers, packing lines should be monitored on a regular basis. Temperatures, disinfectant content, pH. For some people that are using a disinfectant, for example, knowing the temperature of the water or the pH might be important. If you're just using municipal water and you're not treating it, the pH and the temperature is less important. It's just that if you're putting additives in, like certain disinfectants, they'll give you a range. If you want this disinfectant to work, the water temperature ideally needs to be in this range, and it needs to be in this pH range. If the pH is too high or too low, the disinfectant might be bound up in some other chemical form and it won't be working for you. So if there's a guideline on something you're using, then you need to use it. You might have totally potable water in your pack shed, as I do, it's municipal water supply, but we're concerned sometimes about just diseases on the squash. If there's a little bit of black rot, maybe stem blight or something out there, and putting it in the water and then having it maybe move from squash to squash. So sometimes we might disinfect the water with chlorine or something, even though it's not a food safety issue, but we're just trying to be concerned about moving diseases around. And in that case, if you're using something like that, you just need to be following the rules of what you're using to make sure it's effective. Question?
My question actually was a couple slides ago where you were talking about irrigation water.
Yeah.
Now, I know you got to have your tests done before you have your audit, but who does those types of tests?
There's a lot of labs out there. I think we've got some names of some of them in here that use. A lot of towns have their own testing. Like my town just happens to test water. I can bring a sample in, they charge me about 25 bucks, and they'll test for total E. coli and get the numbers back. Not every town does that, but I mean, other people, if they're adjacent to where I live, for example, can go to that lab and pay for a water test. You can go there, you can pick up the little kits, you go pull the water sample yourself and send it in. Any other lab that you might use might have a protocol for what they want you to do, if it's refrigerated, not refrigerated, you know, that kind of thing. So there are plenty of labs out there to do it. But like I said, check with cities and towns first, because you might find, because you hear all the time, for example, oh, they closed such and such a beach, or they closed this area because of E. coli or something like that. Well, I mean, those are tests that are being done locally and very, very quickly. So there's plenty of opportunities.
If you take a test and it's bad or something, is that public knowledge? You pay for it, or you keep it? You keep the knowledge.
You know, I mean, if you really have a problem, you're not gonna be able to have a clean test at some point. You know what I mean? But if you have just an issue like it just happened to rain, you pull the sample, the level's a little bit high, you go back a week later and the level's down, you're okay. Some states allow you to have some highs in there as long as your mean is okay. But certainly if you're able to pull multiple samples, or you know you might be right on the edge or something like that, you know, pull another sample a few days later and see if you're underneath and do that. So, okay. Let's see, close to the end of this. Just a little bit on the packing shed. You know, just keep areas clean. I talked about how we clean our packing shed and how we do things. Just something we do. The problem that GAP throws on top of this is you have to document it. It's one thing to sweep the floor, now you're going to say I swept the floor. It's one thing to clean the bathroom, now you say I cleaned the bathroom. You know, imagine how we all feel when we're traveling and we go into a dirty restroom somewhere on the road and we're like, wait, what is that list? Who signed that thing that said they cleaned the bathroom? You know, it's the same kind of thing that we have to do. Issues if there's anything leaking, have a pest control program in place, don't use raw wood. A pest control program is not that complicated. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, but basically, this room is your packing shed, we'll say, okay? This room is your packing shed. And you know what? That end of the room may be tractor storage, okay? And that corner of the room may just have a little, not even a partition, but that's the area with 2 picnic tables or 2 tables, and that's where your employees eat lunch. But this part of the room is our packing area. Okay, and so we make a little map of our packing area, we lay out our flow of what we're doing, and you'll see that in the audit sheets. We'll put a half a dozen rodent stations around. Now outside you can use baits in the rodent stations, but inside you're not allowed to use any baits, any poisons or anything. You're only, or any baits at all really, you're just allowed to, they all have to be self-contained, you just can't put a mouse trap out there with peanut butter on it. And then you have to have a way of monitoring. You might have a company come in, or you might monitor them yourselves, but you have to have a way of just checking them, and you have to document them. Just overall cleanliness, motors dripping, you know, just things like that. Dumpsters, if they're close to the building, should be closed. If they're further away from the building, they can be open. Here's some rodent stations. Rodent stations should always be on the edges. If you're a mouse and you're over there, and you want to go over there, you're not going this way, okay? You're going, because they don't like to be out in the open unless they're really protected. So rodent stations are always along the walls. Do you have a question? You don't want the auditor to come in and see that. Well, I said a little bit about wood. In the packing area, the auditors like to see these covered. So whether it's a piece of plexiglass, or it's a piece of rubber, or this table here that's made out of plywood is covered with a piece of plexiglass, something like that in the packing area where product is constantly moving and moving and moving over it, people don't like to see wood. Standing water, you know, is bad. These are just general sanitation things. So this gives you a little bit more of a feel for the kinds of things that are being asked. What we're going to do is we're going to break now. We get the taste of the county. We'll come back at 3:15, 3:20. Don't come back any later than 3:20. And what we're going to do is we'll go to the actual audit sheets. I know people say they all bitch and moan about the MCAS test, and they say we're teaching to the test. But you know what? If you're about to have an audit, let's teach to the audit. Okay? So we're going to go through the questions. We're going to cover the first 3 or 4 areas, or as much as we have time to do. And what you'll see is you'll see how the audit sheets match the farm plans that you're going to do, and the kinds of things that you have in the farm plan, and the kind of resources we've already put together for you to putting that farm plan together and how they relate to the questions. And that will put it a little bit more in perspective for you to see if this is something that you want to do. And I'll still maintain to you as you think about this, is that you walk out of here today and you say, yeah, I'm not doing that. I like the education, I learned something maybe, and I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to what I do on my farm. That's something you can do, and there might be a little bit of cost associated with that, but for a lot of people, hopefully they go back and think about the whole food safety issue. At the point that you might become GAP certified, that's great. You go to that next step. If you have a customer that needs it and wants you to do that, and you're able to do it, that's fine. But the thing is that a lot of these concepts just make a lot of sense, even if you don't get to the point where you spend doing all the documentation. So with that, let's take a break, and I'll see you back here in about half an hour.